Haya Suleman had always been a young woman who carried herself with a quiet confidence. Born into a respectable Pakistani family, she had grown up with comfort, love, and security, yet with little strict guidance. Her parents were supportive, but not imposing. They nurtured her intellect and independence, while leaving emotional and spiritual instruction largely absent. From a young age, Haya learned to rely on her mind, her charm, and her wit. She was outspoken, often using sarcasm as both shield and weapon, and she prided herself on her rationality. Religion, to her, was distant, a set of rules observed by others, not by her. It was a cultural expectation she had never internalized, a tradition she tolerated rather than embraced. Her worldview was simple yet firm. Freedom was the highest value. Freedom of thought, freedom of action, freedom from the invisible boundaries her society and religion sometimes imposed. Haya thrived on this independence, moving through life with an air of fearlessness. She made decisions for herself, sought knowledge for herself, and shaped her own path, often ignoring the potential consequences. Life, in her eyes, was meant to be lived fully, boldly, and without restraint. Everything changed the day she received the news that she had been awarded an international scholarship. Haya remembered the moment vividly. Her heart had raced, her mind had spun with excitement, and she had laughed aloud in disbelief. This opportunity promised everything she valued: independence, prestige, the thrill of being far from the confines of home and cultural expectations. For Haya, it was a triumph, a validation of all her hard work, intelligence, and courage. She prepared eagerly, imagining herself stepping into a world where she would answer only to herself, where no one would question her choices or judge her freedoms. Little did she know, the journey she envisioned as purely academic and personal would slowly evolve into something far greater, a test that would challenge not only her intellect and courage, but her heart and spirit. Jahan Sikandar entered the story quietly, like a presence she was not yet ready to understand. He was everything she was not: disciplined, principled, deeply rooted in faith, and guided by an unwavering sense of responsibility. Where Haya lived in spontaneity, Jahan lived in order. Where she sought freedom above all else, he sought purpose and meaning. His life had been shaped by structure, accountability, and devotion, qualities that, at first glance, seemed to Haya foreign, constraining, almost suffocating. When Haya first arrived in the new country, it was everything she had imagined: the bustling streets, the diverse faces, the unfamiliar sounds and smells. All of it excited her. She felt as if she had stepped into a painting where she alone could move freely, unhindered by expectation. Hostel life brought with it the thrill of independence. She formed friendships quickly, savoring the feeling of being accountable only to herself. No one dictated her schedule. No one monitored her decisions. She was free in every sense of the word. At first, this freedom was intoxicating. Haya thrived. She spoke boldly, laughed freely, and carried herself with a confidence that drew admiration and attention. She reveled in the novelty of her surroundings, in the vibrancy of a life lived without boundaries. But beneath the surface, subtle currents of unease began to stir. Living alone, away from the structure of her family and the familiar rituals of home, forced Haya into silence, an emptiness she had never encountered. Initially, the quiet felt liberating, but over time it became unsettling. She began to notice the moments when the thrill of freedom faded into a hollow ache. In the stillness of her room, she realized she had never truly been alone with herself. She had been surrounded by the noise of routine, family, and culture, yet now, stripped of these distractions, she faced the rawness of her own mind. Haya also began to notice people who practiced faith with calm sincerity. They did not appear restricted, oppressed, or unhappy. Instead, they carried a quiet composure, a grounded sense of peace that puzzled her. She watched their rituals, their prayer, their disciplined routines, and felt a mixture of curiosity and unease. Her old assumptions, the idea that faith was a cage, began to crumble, replaced by subtle doubt. She resisted it internally, but the questions would not leave her. This marked the first serious turning point in Haya's journey. On the outside, everything continued smoothly. Her academic performance remained strong, her social life active, and her freedom intact. But inside, she felt a growing discomfort. The very independence she had once celebrated now felt directionless, fragile, and exposed. Silence and isolation began exposing the gaps in her emotional and spiritual life, gaps she had long ignored. Haya began witnessing consequences in her surroundings, subtle, sometimes hidden, but unmistakable. Small mistakes by peers led to unexpected outcomes. Careless words and impulsive actions produced tension and regret. She saw similar patterns in herself, and for the first time she felt their weight. Her intellect clashed with her conscience. She still believed she was rational, independent, and right, yet doubt began creeping into her thoughts. Moments of guilt, embarrassment, and emotional fragility punctuated her days. She tried to suppress them, but the internal tension persisted, growing stronger with each week. It was during this phase that Jahan Seconder's presence became more noticeable. His life was disciplined, ordered, and purposeful. He endured hardships, yet his sense of duty never wavered. He carried a calm authority that drew attention without demanding it. Though their interactions were still minimal, Haya felt herself observing him more closely. She noticed the serenity in his actions, the clarity of his thoughts, and the quiet strength that came from living with accountability. Fear, an unfamiliar companion, entered Haya's life. Not fear of others, but fear of consequences, of vulnerability, of situations beyond her control. She realized that intelligence, wit, and confidence were not enough to navigate life alone. This fear was real, tangible, and it shook her to the core. Haya's carefree superiority began to crumble. She felt exposed, small, and uncertain. Where she had once seen rules as unnecessary constraints, she now began to notice their value. Discipline, boundaries, and caution were not limitations, they were protection. They provided safety, dignity, and structure, elements she had never fully appreciated. Her observances of Jahan deepened. He was not perfect, nor was he privileged. His strength came from self-discipline, from purpose, from faith. He was calm, principled, and respectful. Haya found herself drawn to these qualities, though she did not yet understand why. His presence unsettled her, forcing her to question the worldview she had long held. Gradually, Haya began to pause. She stopped mocking faith, dismissing rules, or arguing against discipline. She observed, reflected, and listened. The simple act of noticing, of allowing herself to consider that there might be wisdom in restraint, marked the first step in her transformation. She began practicing self-restraint in small ways. These were not grand gestures for appearance or approval, but personal decisions rooted in awareness. She valued privacy, modesty, and control, not because society demanded it, but because she recognized their protective power. Emotional struggles followed. Letting go of habits and attitudes that had once defined her confidence was painful. She felt isolated, misunderstood, and exhausted. Yet these challenges were necessary. They revealed the fragility of her earlier life and the potential for a stronger, more grounded self. Jahan's influence, though subtle, grew. He remained distant yet observant, protective yet measured. His guidance was indirect, shown through example rather than words. Haya realized that strength was not in reckless freedom, but in control, patience, and principle. Faith, she understood slowly, refined emotion rather than stifling it. She began understanding trust and responsibility differently. Earlier, she had given her trust freely, expecting little accountability. Now she recognized that true trust required discipline, reflection, and care. Every choice had weight, and every action carried consequences. Divine awareness, once abstract, began to feel present and personal. God was not distant or harsh, but aware, merciful, and protective. Admiration for Jahan deepened into a subtle emotional attachment. She noticed his calmness, patience, and integrity, qualities starkly contrasting her impulsiveness. She felt drawn to him, yet cautious. Her heart recognized something of value in his principles, even if her mind struggled to reconcile it with her old worldview. External challenges continued to test her. Academic pressures, social situations, and moments of temptation forced decisions that carried lasting consequences. Immediate gratification competed with the long-term benefits of discipline and integrity. Each choice became a test of her emerging awareness, her ability to pause, reflect, and act responsibly. Through it all, Jahan remained a quiet anchor. His strength inspired reflection. Haya realized that transformation was not instant. It required patience, effort, and ongoing sacrifice. Impulsiveness gradually gave way to deliberation, carelessness to cautious thought. By now, Haya had moved far from the carefree, reckless girl who had arrived months earlier. She had become aware of her vulnerability, the value of guidance, and the necessity of discipline. Pride and desire still pulled at her, but she had taken the first crucial steps toward understanding that true freedom required responsibility, reflection, and faith. Even in her uncertainty, there was hope. She was no longer blind to the gaps in her life. The first cracks had appeared in her ego, and through those cracks, light began to enter. Haya's journey had shifted. It was no longer only about independence, adventure, or intellectual growth. It had become a path of awakening, reflection, and cautious transformation.